Hey everyone, my name's Ben, this is the mini painting page, and today I wanted to go over a colour scheme that I use for my Necron army, which is aiming to be a glorious golden colour scheme, which is not only efficient and easy to replicate on a large scale, but also looks good on the tabletop and can be pushed that little bit further for character models. So, without any further ado, let's jump straight in and we will start off with a model that is, in this case, spray coated black in Chaos Black Spray from Citadel. However, feel free to base coat whatever model you'll be using in whatever form of black you'd like, and we can jump in with the actual painting. Now, as mentioned, today I am going to be using a Royal Warden model for the example, and that's because what better way to celebrate 10th edition, this year's release, by painting a model released as part of 9th edition. For this model, I chose not to build it in sub-assemblies. However, I did take the time to snip off the pipes that connect the back to the gun, as well as the pre-sculpted details on the base or the foot. This should hopefully differentiate him slightly from the other Royal Warden I already have in my army. However, when doing this yourself, you may decide to prepare your model in an alternate way. This may be in sub-assemblies or in alternate conversions. However, at a bare minimum, I would want to suggest that you make sure to smooth out and remove all of the mold lines. And the reason for that is that some of the techniques that we'll be using later on in the process and in the painting of this model may draw more attention to those mold lines than you would like if they are present on the model. Now, with all that said and done, we want to take our models which are based in a black undercoat and give them a nice coat of dark gold or a bronzy colour of some sort. If you want to add some additional tonal variants to this, you could add a slightly darker metallic. I'm essentially thinking the old tin bits colour, but I'm pretty sure there are some more modern equivalents available at this precise moment. But that darker colour will add a bit more of a range when we use the later steps, so you will get some more variance in the armour. When applying this colour, we want to make sure that we do thin it down slightly. This will mean that we may need to go over with a couple of coats to get a nice clean cover over the black undercoat. But by doing this, it means that we should get a nice layer coat without affecting or adding any textures or obscuring any of the details. This also gives us the opportunity to check the model mid-stage and confirm that we've got all of the areas we want covered. And if we haven't, we can make sure that we pick them up on the second pass. Once this is fully dry, because we're using a black undercoat, the bronze colour should be nice and shiny and we can look at adding some colour detail. The current Necron sculpts are built to look a bit more ragged and war-torn and damaged, so we're going to add into this through the use of a sporadic purple wash. And what we're going to do is take down this thinned purple. In my case, I'm using, I believe it's Eidolon purple, which is an air colour, or I'm using the air colour variant. And I'm going to thin this down slightly and then start to essentially slap it all over the model. And the convenience here is this is already partially thinned, so I don't have to spend as much time thinning the paint down. What we're going to want to do is take this slightly thinned down paint and slap it across the model in what seems to be a truly random fashion. It is okay to be slightly heavy-handed here, as we do have the opportunity to come back and correct any overuse at this particular moment. And what I'm going to do is take a little bit more time to push the washes into the deeper areas of the model, while also making sure that there's not a lot of pooling on the wider, flatter areas that could lead to unsightly tide marks when it is dry. Obviously, you could take as much time as you want to get the effects you want and pull off as much pooling as needed. For some of the more basic troops choices, it might not be as essential to make sure that you get all of the pooling on the underside, as predominantly it's going to be the top front of the model that is seen. Though naturally, if you're going to a tournament or you want the best looking army that you can get in a short period of time, just add a little bit more time touching up on this particular step and it can go a long way and avoid any potential bits that we need to go back and fix later on. With this applied, we can wait for the purple to dry, and once it is dry, we should have a model where the sculpted details are showing that little bit of extra detail due to the wash, while also maintaining a nice metallic undertone. What we then want to do is take a brighter, paler gold and dry brush this in a medium to light fashion across the entire model. I'm using a brush I picked up online from an eyelash store. These are cheap and super soft. However, the main issue being that they are such short bristled and quite chunky, that in this case I do need to come back in as well with a smaller brush to get into all of the areas covered by the gun and the cape. However, if I took the time to build this model in subassembly, I could easily come back in with just this one eyelash brush and go through and batter the whole thing in a nice overcoat of gold in one go. So feel free to use whatever makeup brush you have or whatever dry brush you're using. And with this dry brush, we are aiming to get a second gold tone onto the armor, while also picking up the areas of the gold wash, which helps to blend these colors together by overlaying the initial gold, the purple, and then the new dry brush layer of gold. And I personally feel that this adds a relatively nice weather beaten look to the gold armor. But you may notice that it has lost a lot of color in this example, which has been sapped out by the brighter, more desaturated gold that we've used. So to amend that, we are going to use another dry brush once the first is dry. And this time we're going to come in with a darker, richer gold, and we want to be careful to be dry brushing in one direction, starting from the top of the model and working down to its feet. This should add yet another tone to the metal while also adding back in some of that nice richness. Once we've covered the whole model in this dry brush, we can then move over to the next step once it is completely and utterly dry. And that next step is going to be another application of the Eidolon purple wash in my case, or whatever purple you're choosing to use. This is one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure that the dry brush is completely dry before we apply the wash, because we don't want any of the metallic flakes from the recent dry brush working its way into the wash. So bearing that in mind, we can then move over once it is completely dry, and we want to take this purple wash and once again apply it across the model in a random fashion. However, this time we do want to take a little bit of extra care to not go overboard and oversaturate the model, and also to direct the wash into more of the recesses and internal areas. Once we're happy, we can let it dry and move on to the next step, which will be to come in with a final dry brush on the skeletal structure of the model. We are going to be using the rich gold again, and here we're going to come in with a truly light dry brush, and lighter than we've done so far. Come over and build up again over a couple of passes, working from the highest point of the model down to the feet, and that should give us a model's appearance where the armor is weather beaten, war torn, and has multiple layers of shading and colors throughout the metal while also remaining shiny and clearly metallic. With the bulk of the skeletal frame done and the other metal areas covered, we can move over to the purple accent colors. And to start off, we are going to be using a color which is bluish grey, not purple at all. But we are going to take this bluish grey and we are going to go over the areas we want to be purple in the end. Here I'm picking out some of the pipes as well as the weapon orbs and the eyes. You do want to try and be precise here. The better we are and the more accurate we are at this stage, the less we have to come back and touch up at a later stage. So it just saves a bit of time being a bit more accurate at this point. As you can see, I am taking a little bit of time to make sure that I catch all of the ridges around the eyes here, and that is to help sell a very simple glow effect. What we want to do is make sure that we put down a couple of coats to get a nice clean coverage, as we don't want any of the metallic parts that may have been on those areas already showing through this underlying color of bluish grey. When we've covered the chosen areas for the purple placement in this bluish grey, we can take our chosen rich royal purple color paint. With this being YouTube, I'm going to be using an out-of-date paint from the old Citadel range, which is Lich Purple, which is personally one of my favourite purple colours. However, you can feel free to use any rich or chosen purple which you think would reflect your army and your tastes accordingly. So feel free to use anything that you would like. However, I am using Lich Purple here. Whatever chosen paint we opt to use, we want to make sure that we do thin it down and go over all of the areas that we've picked out with the bluish grey paint. Because of the lighter base coat, we should be able to get a nice bright coat of this purple after only one, maybe two passes, which we can then look at brightening up the areas if we need to. Now for ease, if you want to wet blend the next steps, you can do. However, if you're not going to be wet blending, follow along, because we're going to be looking at making some glow effects across the areas, mainly the wires and the orbs, potentially the eyes, depending how detailed you want to get. So for anyone like me that will not be wet blending, what we want to do is make sure that the lich purple we're using is dry, and then I'm personally going to be taking another out of production colour in the form of Warlock Purple, and this is a layer that we'll use to represent the hotspots. Naturally, you can use any brighter purpley pink shade depending how you want to colour it. What I'm going to be doing on the actual model, however, is going in to do small dots on the eyes, small dots on the orbs, and also select a middle section of the pipes and tubes and essentially colour these in with that paint. This will hopefully give a brighter middle section, and it will look like hot energy is passing through. Do consider where you want the brightest point to be. Generally, this will be the deepest, most central point, as opposed to the edges that we would normally do with traditional highlighting. But at the end of the day, it's the rule of cool, and whatever you like the look of is what you can go for, and feel free to crack on. Once we've gone over and selected all the areas and painted a nice layer down of this Warlock Purple, we can wait for this to dry, and we can essentially do the same process but with narrower, finer points. And the colour that we're going to be using for this one is going to be a combination of the mid-tone, which in my case is the Warlock Purple that we've just applied, as well as the light greyish blue undercoat that we used initially. This is one of the reasons for the lightish blue undercoat. The colour is already present on the model, albeit covered by the other paints and slightly obscured in that sense, but there is still a potential trace read of that colour, which when we add to the Warlock Purple will give us the option to brighten it up, possibly desaturating it slightly, but still blending in nicely because of the underlying layers that we've done initially. With this mix of colour, we can then be essentially identifying localized bright spots. Due to the lighter colour we've added, we may again need to do a couple of coats just to stop it looking patchy. You could potentially try to sell this as a destabilized energy power spike or hotspot, but here what we're going to do is try and get some nice clean coats through the center of the areas we've already identified from the last step. And this should shift our color scheme from essentially going from a lich purple through to a warlock up to a warlock mixed with a bluish gray. And with that done, there may be some obvious separation. So what we want to do is rectify that, and we will be doing that by taking a fine brush, coming in with the final dots of bluish gray, which was the undercoat that we did, and taking this paint, applying very, very small amounts to spot highlight in quote unquote the hottest areas of where the purple will be. We don't want to go overboard, we just need a couple of lines or dots in the areas of what we've done so far, and this should give us a nice light spot on the purple areas. Now, if you want to experience this in the same way that I did, make sure to reach out and grab the wrong brush, meaning that you're doing this entire thing with a split tip brush. It makes it a lot more enjoyable and I guess frustrating. Now, as you'll remember, I did just mention that we're going to be looking at blending these separation lines if present across the model, and how we're going to be doing that is using the final steps on the purple accents, which is to take the initial purple color we used on the armor plates. So in this case, it is Eidolon purple for me. And what I want to do is thin this down to either a thick glaze or thin wash consistency, and then go over all of the purple areas in one layer. This should do two things. One, it should darken down the whole area across the purple, blending the lines together and making them harder to see. And two, it should bring the purple colors that we've applied so far back in line with the purple tones on the rest of the model. Now, with this first layer done, what we can do is come back in potentially with a thin layer on top and start to blend the hottest spots and the darkest areas by starting with our brush, which has this wash attached, applying it to where we want the transition to start on the hot spot and dragging it to the darker area. After a couple of coats, we will get a nice even blend of color across the two, which will look nice at a glance for our models. And it will give us that nice hot spot of energy passing through pipes and being emitted by the orbs on the model. Now, with those aspects done, we can lastly move over to the final color, which for my force is a grayish black tone for some of the pipes in additional areas. And for this, what I want to do is take a black paint and mix it in with, surprise, surprise, the initial dark purple that we used across the other areas on the model. And I'm going to mix this in a roughly 50-50 ratio and cover the remaining pipes, tubes, and everything that isn't currently purple or gold. This should still look mostly black once dry, but then will be an underlying shade of purple. Once it is dry, we can then go back in and take the initial bluish grey that we used and thin this down and go in to do some edge highlighting. So on this warden, this is going to be the ridges of the pipe, and it's also going to be some of the internal areas behind the gun. With this stage done, we're going to finish off the area with a nice quick Nuln oil, which will quickly merge the different colours between the purpley black to the bluish grey and merge all these tones together to make a nice black grey with subtle other colours mixed within it, such as the bluish grey and the purples that we've used. Now, for any of our standard troops, anything like a Necron warrior or something that's going to come in large units and be abundance on the tabletop, this may just be enough. All we have to do is go through and touch up any of the potential overspill areas we've gone in with the gold or anything like that, just to make sure that the colours are where we want the colours to be, essentially. And providing they are, mount it, send it out, and there shouldn't be an issue. However, this one that I'm working on is a character and may get some additional scrutiny because of that. Since it is potentially going to get some more scrutiny, I think that I need to push the level up slightly more. And I'm going to be doing that through the application of edge highlighting. And I'm going to be picking a different colour that we haven't used as of yet, but this is a gold that is currently brighter than the others that we've used so far, as well as also being more saturated and richer in colour. Here I'm using the liquid metal range from Charles Roberson, which is a selection of around 60 metallic colours, and personally I haven't found anything quite like them before. I'm taking the brass colour from this range and I'm going around the model and edge highlighting all of the metallic frames and gold areas that we've done. To do this, what I want to do is thin down the paint so it comes off the brush smoothly, while also leaving a nice coat of paint behind so that we don't have to go in and make multiple passes on some potentially tricky areas to access. With the paint thinned down and a brush at roughly a 45-degree angle to the surface we're painting, we can run the mid-section of the brush across this area, and that should deposit a decent amount of paint on the very edge of the model, which should give us a nice bright edge with this color. Now, with all that done, we have a finished model that we can send out onto the tabletop and out to play a game of 40k with, or I guess any type of game you want to use a miniature for. This took around 30 minutes, 45 minutes in total. It was 30-ish minutes without the edge highlighting, which means that if we were doing a large army and including a lot of warriors, we would be able to batch paint them and potentially get a large force on the table quite quickly, especially if we include things such as using an airbrush or skills like wet blending. So overall, hopefully that is an achievable paint scheme that is very quick, efficient and simple to do and pull off so that we can get large, nicely painted models onto the table without much hassle. If you haven't already, do remember to subscribe. Check out this video on basing if you haven't got your own basing scheme sorted out as of yet. And until next time, goodbye.